Well, we have a distinguished group gathered to comment on the DVD of Passion. I'm Ira Weitzman.
I'm James Lapine.
I'm Stephen Sondheim.
Donna Murphy.
I'm Jere Shea.
I'm Marin Mazzie.
And that's the red curtain.
There's the red curtain.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it must be asked right away. Marin?
Yes.
You're naked.
I know, I am completely naked.
Everybody wants to know where your mic is.
My mic is in my head.
In your wig.
In my wig, yes.
It could be in your head.
It could be, yes. It was implanted surgically in my head.
Wait, this is my wife's favorite part.
I was trying to think what other musicals other than Hair and O Calcutta had nudity in them prior to Passion. I couldn't think of any.
Well, I've never asked you. Was it difficult for you to get used to this, or was it easy for you to just zen yourself into I'm naked, I'm this character, I'm not Marin?
Once we sort of did it, I don't know if you remember that day we had that naked day in the rehearsal studio. Where it was and I think after that, and of course I felt so comfortable with Jere and comfortable with the staging, how he had staged it, the lighting, all of that. So this ended up being like one of the most favorite things I've ever done, this scene. I actually really loved it, and it was very freeing, I thought.
Because every subsequent production of this I've seen, she's been clothed.
Right.
Nobody would do it naked. They just got too self-conscious. And
yeah. The thing I remember about taping this is that we had to keep the sheet up because we didn't have to do that on Broadway, and that was...
Oh, that's right.
We had to hold
that's
it.
Right.
We had to keep it up.
The viewer's not seeing the full Marin Mazzie.
There's a website where you can get it naked.
The G-rated version of Passion. Or the PG-rated version of Passion, I should say.
Now, Jere's mic is in his head, obviously, too. The mic, but the pack is in the pillows.
Oh.
And the wire is taped to his back. And...
You'd take it off me every night.
Every night when he'd come at the end, when he comes over me, I would rip it off his head and peel peel it down, hit it taped, peel it down his back.
Oh my goodness.
I was always very nice to her right before.
And you got rid of yours how then?
Mine just remained in my wig. It's in my wig. The pack and
the
everything
pack and
is in.
the mic.
Yeah,
right.
it's just in there.
Who made that wig? That's a great wig.
Paul Huntley.
Wow.
Yeah.
God, there's a whole pack in there. That's incredible.
It's a great wig.
Must have been heavy on your head, huh?
Well, you get used to it. It's like right down the nape of your neck.
No, but this is more.
What about singing that close to each other? Most duets in shows, naked or not, people aren't usually quite that close to each other.
Right.
They're usually a few feet apart. That both musically and kind of emotionally, does it make any difference to be that close to each other and singing out?
I think for this, it was so great to be so close together because of, obviously what we were singing about and you know, the making love and all of that. I do remember, too, having trouble. Sound-wise, they had a lot of trouble because we were so close getting our levels correct with our microphones and stuff. But...
And this is a scene where you really had to show up for the scene and just, hit your acting moments and not worry about the logistics or my breath, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You take care of that ahead of time.
Yes, exactly.
I wasn't going to say that, but that's
Yeah.
exactly it, If you just had a spaghetti dinner,
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you wrote the score, Steve? Like what you wrote first? Did you write the song first?
Yes, I started. I wanted to start the show with, I want to start it, both begin the show and end the show with a scream. The first one being her orgasm, and the last one being Fosca's orgasm. And because I like bookends, and I thought, well, that'll be...
And orgasm.
It's orgasm. And the problem was that after Fosca has her orgasm, there's more plot to come, and I could never solve that. She has to die, there has to be a coda, et cetera, et cetera. But I thought it would be nice to begin. That's what the high instruments in the orchestra are supposed to be. It's supposed to be Clara's scream at the very beginning.
Did we ever have an orgasm at the top of the show?
No, it's in the orchestra. It's in the orchestra. Yeah, that's.
I think in the workshop, it kind of began with a.
It did with a sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
in
more
progress orgasm.
Yeah, I mean, you saw we did it more bodily.
Right.
because we
when
obviously
they did
didn't
it
have
in
the
London,
curtain.
I have to say they did it. They were screwing doggy style,
Oh.
and it was actually Giorgio who had the orgasm in London.
Was that true?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Then it should have been in the basses instead of in the violins.
I think
Wasn't that Michael Ball?
Yeah, it was sort of
Well,
from
maybe.
the
Oh, God, I
high
think
register.
Maybe not.
Well, this is disappointing when I can see any of your breasts. here.
No.
Because,
No, but it's,
Either is the word.
but a good gam shot there.
Good gam
There you
shot.
go.
Yeah.
They're looking good too.
it's beautifully filmed, I think,
It
for,
is.
I think so.
for
It was.
video.
Yeah.
And for a show of such intimacy, it really benefited
was-
from
That's
this.
James. That's James.
No, I
It
should
was.
say, just so people know, it was shot on film rather than videotape, and we had, I think, 5 cameras that were filming it. The problem with it, each of the cameras only had 10-minute magazines in it, so
Oh, yeah.
it was
Right.
just an incredible nightmare trying to figure out which camera was going to go out when.
Hmm.
And in fact, we lost two
Oh, yes.
magazines of film. One at the end, you'll see where we don't have the prettiest cutting in the world. But John Bailey, who did the cinematography, is a very well-known cinematographer, just did a beautiful job lighting this.
But it was your insistence on film that makes all the difference.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
tape, this would have been really gross. But it's such an intimate show, it actually really lends itself nicely to these close-ups.
Who are those people?
The soldiers.
I thought that was stagehands.
Jane Comfort, wasn't she? That
Jane
she
Comfort,
staged the
right.
soldier maneuvers.
She tells me the first day she came on was I had her work with Jere and Marin in the bed scene. She says it was her introduction to Broadway. She said I had just turned to her and said, "Oh, go do that." It was like, what? Yeah, the damn table.
Yep. Did,
Bane of my existence. that
well, also
table.
no. Also, the way they lift the chairs all at the same time. That's not so easy.
Yeah, and there's
There's Francis.
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 No longer with us.
No longer with us.
No longer with us.
Many veterans of Sondheim musicals.
Yeah, well, Gregg.
Tom Aldredge,
Tom.
Greg Edelman,
Mhm.
T.J. Myers. Wasn't he in the workshop of Sunday in the
That
Park
he
with
was in-
George?
I think he
But
was.
no,
Parry.
he
Did
replaced.
he play Mister at some
He may
point?
have maybe, or he replaced.
I remember the
Remember
name
some-
connected with
and
him.
Bill Parry
Yeah.
Right.
from Assassins
Yeah.
and
On Sunday.
Sunday in the
Yeah.
Park with
Right.
George.
There's that
Marcus Olson.
That
from
great
Assassins.
set with that staircase.
Yeah, Adrian.
A friend of mine who's an architect took one look at the set. I said, "Isn't it impressive?" He said, "Have they checked with the building code?" he didn't. He meant in Italy. He didn't mean to argue about it, but he meant they wouldn't have allowed that staircase to be built.
On such a quite steep rake.
Yeah.
Did you miss the staircase in Washington?
Yes.
For instance.
Yeah. Staircase. Well, first of all, the staircase in the movie behind those glass bricks is what I think that was the thing that really hooked me into the movie, was seeing Fosca come down and not quite see her because you just saw the shadow behind the bricks. And so the staircase for me is absolutely, part and parcel of the emotion of the piece. So it's hard to get. On the other hand, I thought the set in Washington was absolutely stunning. It was all just louvered shutters, but 100 feet high, and so it was all about lighting. But I do miss the staircase.
Marin's fastest
The letter.
costume
My
change.
fastest
Yes,
change
Oh,
from
we must comment on Marin's dresses.
From complete nudity to this. Jane Greenwood.
Yeah, out there.
Fantastic dresses.
Absolutely
Gorgeous
gorgeous.
costumes.
He must have had a dozen dresses
Yeah,
in
I
this
had-
show.
Like 9 or 10, I
And this
think.
quick costume change, were you ever late?
I was never late. And I do remember the sound guy, because we actually did, I forgot, Steve, you asked me about my mic. We did drop my mic down to my thigh because of the wig, because Paul didn't want it in my wig for the profile. And this mic guy had to come in every night and hook me, had to lay under me and hook me up. And it was Stuart, this one guy, and then his sub came in, and he was beat red because he was laying literally, and I had nothing on, and so there he was looking right up at me, hooking my mic up.
Hard to do with your eyes closed.
Well, at least you weren't singing.
No, I wasn't singing.
You look good, Jerry.
Why, thank you.
Now, your
Photograph
hair,
really-
To be young again.
and your hair was naturally curly, may I ask? or
Yes.
what-
Jerry,
Much to my chagrin.
Jerry, didn't you have a beard when we started?
What didn't I have?
Yes.
I was like one of those chia pets for a while. Just don't shave anything, don't trim anything, just keep it coming, keep it coming.
Yeah, we did play with your looks now that you mentioned, didn't we? Shave,
Yeah.
don't
Quite a bit.
shave. Right.
The sideburns are still.
The much.
I
Still
totally
there.
forgot the hat. I must say, now it looks like a halo.
I forgot it too, completely.
And when I cannot bear
Such a strange show.
Well, it's the world's only epistolary musical. Everybody reads letters all evening long, and then the curtain falls.
And whose idea was that to make it?
That was
A musical that letters.
Well, it was my idea to make a musical from this movie, but this movie was made from a book that's about letters.
Tarquetti's.
Book Fosca it's the first person, but it's all epistolary.
Written what in the 1860s, something like that.
80s, I think maybe.
Yeah, a little later, I
Yeah.
think. I'm not sure. It was.
He never finished it. He died at the age of 29 and without having quite finished it. And it's supposedly based on an experience he had with an epileptic woman. He was famous as a kind of revolutionary writer. He had a little kind of coterie of other writers, young Turks, rebels. But it's interesting, in the book, Giorgio, character played by Jere, is sickly the way Fosca is. He has just recovered from an illness, and so he has a certain kind of physical weakness, which we did not exploit in the musical, and wasn't exploited in the film either. There's a kind of he's got a kind of physical delicacy. Of constitution, not of body, but of constitution. So there's this kind of bond between him and Fosca.
Doctor.
Your troops are responding well under your command.
Thank you.
How are you enjoying our post, Captain?
I find everyone most hospitable.
Good, good. Your company at meals has been a welcome change for me.
Oh, thank you.
I trust that the occasional outbursts from Colonel Ricci's cousin have not unsettled you too greatly.
Now, what exactly is wrong with this woman?
She is a kind of medical phenomenon, a collection of many ills.
And those cries?
Those are
Well, we have to
hysterical.
note that Tom Aldredge was not our original doctor. Actually, he was our third doctor, right?
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah,
Ron
Rifkin
in the
Rifkin.
workshop.
Yeah, Ron
Workshop.
Workshop.
And
Bill.
Bill Duff
Bill
Griffin.
Duff Griffin.
And then Tom took over. I think it was just so hard to find that character.
Mhm.
He does a marvelous job, Tom.
Yeah.
I sure did.
And I think he was nominated for a Tony for that performance.
Yeah, he
He
was.
was.
Late 20s, I would venture.
It's interesting because it's essentially a non-singing role,
Right.
and Tom can sing.
There's a little evil edge to him here in this role.
Well, the doctor has that.
Yeah.
He was played by Trentillon, Jean-Louis Trentillon, on the film, who had been a romantic hero, so it's quite a different look, as we say.
Steve, when did you see the film?
1983. I think it was released in 81, and then it played in New York in 83, at cinema across the street from Lincoln Center. And that's where I saw it, and that's where I fell in love with it, or wanted to do it as a musical, I should say. It all had to do with the moment when Fosca makes her first entrance,
Which is coming
which
right
is
up.
coming up. And what happened in the movie is this extremely frightening lady came down the stairs, and you knew that it would, she was in love with the guy, and then there was a close-up of the guy, and I realized the story was going to be about how he falls in love with her, not vice versa. And I was so deeply moved, I started to cry.
Did you attempt to write it right away, or implement the idea
No.
right away?
It came about because James had an idea. I can't remember which one came first, for a piece called Muscle, which is also about physical appearances, which is based on a memoir of a bodybuilder. And I thought Passion should be a one act. It seemed to be a compact piece. And by one act, I don't mean an hour and 40 minutes. I mean an hour. And Muscle sort of seemed the same way. And so we thought, wouldn't it I hate to interrupt Donna's entrance with all this Hazarai, but
Well, let's come back to that in a second, because this was so beautiful on stage. You don't actually, this is the one moment you don't quite
because you're not far
feel,
back-
because
far
of the
back enough.
parallel entrances was just breathtaking,
Yes.
I remember.
Did you ever trip on those steps, Donna?
I don't think so.
did you find yourself
It
having to
was
look
so-
down all the time to be sure that you didn't fall
No,
down?
I felt so connected
With
to
the
the
banister?
banister and the floor.
When did we
Each
shoot this?
step.
Did we shoot it in 1 day or 2 days?
Like
Just
2 days.
I think
right?
2 days.
Right after we
Right
closed
after
the
we
shows.
closed.
Remember, we were going to do a Forbidden Broadway version where you tumble down the steps. Bum, 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 bum. It's Fosca.
Captain.
All right, so let's talk. How many moles did we start with?
Oh, gosh. I've got
Well,
the
and
mole
the
kid in my
geography
bag,
kept
you know.
changing too.
How did your
Jerry
costumes?
Schoenfeld would come in one night and say, move it over to the right.
He
Well,
would.
Donna, it must
My
be
wife doesn't
it must
like
be
it.
noted you're one of the most beautiful women in the theater.
Yeah.
playing
Sure.
this.
No, the
creature.
irony is so often you're casting a role, and there are physical qualities, vocal qualities, acting qualities you look for. And James and I thought, well, this one won't be as hard as most shows to cast because you don't need a really beautiful woman since it's about a woman. So looks don't matter; it's voice and acting. And who comes in and gives this knockout audition, but one of the city's most beautiful actresses, and it's in a way hilarious to try to make Donna look ugly in the movie. The woman who plays it is not actually a very ugly woman, but the makeup, because you can do so much more in movies, made her look genuinely frightening. She looked like a skull come to life.
Well, we had made remember the first preview? We had a bald cap on you.
Yep.
And,
Well, I remember there was a reference in the original novel that talked about a vision that he had of her, or a viewing that he had of her, where she had this extremely high forehead, catching the reflection of the moonlight, and how skeletal she looked. And that stayed with me. And I have a round, somewhat, fleshier face, and I wanted to exaggerate that, my forehead, and elongate, and we tried, and it never
well, it's just
quite worked.
people. It worked. It's just people were horrified.
No, and it does change the value of the show, because this, as one looks at it, despite Donna's acting, she's a plain woman, not a frighteningly ugly one, which is what she was in the movie. In the movie, she was scary, and in fact, one of the brilliances of the movie is that at the moment of consummation with Giorgio, at the climax of the movie, there's a shot of her in great ecstatic joy, and she's uglier than she has ever been before. The joy, instead of transforming her, makes her more Fosca-like, which is what's so wonderful about it. She becomes completely herself, and what we have with Donna is Donna had to act all of that because there's no way of making her frightening looking.
Oh, that's pretty scary to me.
No.
Donna, how did you have to prepare to play such an extreme character?
Well, I remember when I auditioned, I had such an immediate emotional response to what I was given to prepare, which was
this scene.
This is
Yes.
the song.
And to me, it was all there. And I was actually talking to my husband last night about this and remembering that this role came to me at a time in my life where I had an emotional identification that I was able to make. That I remember Steve and I, and I've never really spoken
She
specifically.
promised she would tell me about it, and we never got to sit down and talk about
And
it.
there's a part of me that still feels protective of aspects of that, but a lot of people, when I would reference it in this, vague way, thought it had to do with the relationship thing, but it actually had to do with a period in my life where I was physically vulnerable and was dealing with an illness, a condition that I came to sort of identify myself via that. I mean, in terms of that, I should say, which completely shifted my my sense of self, and and there was a kind of defensiveness that developed in me, and I just got something in her that kept me from judging her.
It's very rare that somebody comes in and auditions singing a song that belongs to the score, particularly one as complex as this, and understands every nuance. I mean, I think I actually said to James in my hyperbolic way, I said, she's ready to go on the stage. She understood every single thing in this song. There was nothing I could tell her that she didn't know. I've rarely seen an audition like that. Maybe never.
It was so there. And I remember I was doing Hello Again at the time. Right. And which was a Michael John LaCusa piece that we were doing a workshop
based on
of.
Laurent.
Right. And we were, I don't know, it was the second or third week of rehearsal, and I got the call about this and was given this piece of music, which, I mean, I remember looking through it at Lincoln Center where we were rehearsing, and I was devastated just reading it. I was weeping, and the audition was like in 2 days or 3 days, and I remember saying, I can't do it. I know that I need more time to own this a little bit more, because I didn't want to just go in and sing the notes. And yet there was a very strong initial response. And then it just worked out that I was able to come in later on, and I had a couple of days off from the workshop, and I just kind of immersed myself in it. And I remember my husband saying, do I have to have breakfast with Fosca? You don't even have the job yet. Wash your hair, for Christ's sake.
But I remember that so well, because you were playing a very glamorous character in Hello Again. And you came to work, looking as gorgeous as you are. And when Fosca came around and the audition and the workshop, you began to stop wearing makeup to work, and you had your hair slicked back, and it was really like the character emerging from inside.
You didn't have a preliminary audition for us singing just a song, did you?
No, I just
You
maybe
auditioned on August 20th, 1993.
Oh my God.
So everybody knew you could sing, obviously, because ordinarily somebody auditioning for a part doesn't get a song from the show until they've just sung a song, so that people can get a take on not only their voice but their attitude, personality, et cetera, approach. But so you.
What about you, Marin? Did you sing from the show?
I sang Happiness.
Right.
And you didn't sing, had no preliminary audition either, huh?
No, I sang Happiness, which was
And
interesting
you had
because
a letter, I think, to read.
I had a
one of the
letter to read, and I
letters,
sang Happiness, but I sang both parts, which is now how Barbara Cook sings it, which is so great. But it was so interesting to.
Did you put the both parts together, or did I?
I think
that's how we gave it out.
That's how you gave it
out,
yeah. So I just sang both. I just sang it through.
Yeah.
What about you, Jere? I remember you were sort of damn Yankee, right?
Yeah, more or less. I have a faint memory of singing the I Wish I Could Forget You. I think that was what I came in front of you with.
The fields, a river even, of course.
Jere, you were cast for the Broadway production when we did the workshop at Lincoln Center some months earlier. Oh, I love this scene.
Was Gregg Edelman in the workshop? Who played that in the workshop?
Simon Jones.
Yes.
Simon Jones.
Good memory.
Yeah.
Would you lend my cousin your arm?
Of course.
We'll catch up with you in a moment.
I know how to walk.
What's great about it is just how unlikable old dear Fosca is, which was, of course, our biggest problem when we were in previews on Broadway, which, when we did the workshop, everybody just loved it, and then the minute we got on a Broadway stage, people were really not too engaged.
What do you think that was? I mean, what the difference between what people saw? I mean, it was a different audience at the workshop as well.
Totally different.
And a different space. We were much closer and more intimate to the stage than on Broadway.
I think, first of all, there's an expectation. You have a certain expectation of musicals on Broadway, and boy, there certainly was nothing to prepare anyone for this. There are no opportunities for applause. It's just very different in so many ways. But we really did.
And also, James had things like there were little moments all the way through, like the lock of hair, that sort of thing, that audiences found silly because they didn't understand that was part of the 19th century.
Right.
The business of leaving a lock of hair to somebody or sending it in a letter or something like that. So there were numerous tiny things that a 19th century audience would have accepted right away that a 20th century audience just thought was ridiculous. And what we did was, I think all these rumors about, how disastrous, there were certain disastrous nights, but I swear to God, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, within a week of previews, or maybe even 10 days, we had red flagged all those moments where the audience, guffawed and fixed them. The last one that I remember fixing was Fosca's entrance onto the train, when she suddenly appears, and you think, oh my God, here she comes again.
Right.
And that was all a matter of timing, all a matter of when she followed the two parts of the train together.
Well, that train scene was always the moment at which the show was falling apart. People would sort of go with it. First of all, it starts with naked people, and I remember everybody going, oh, yeah,
Right.
this is going to be fun.
Oh, really?
That's it. That's the end of the fun.
We should have had a naked scene with Fosca. Maybe we'd still be running.
The revival of the song. Yeah, but the train scene coming up was really the turning point. When you wrote the song is when it really, I felt.
Well, yeah, people say that, but but the train scene, the song comes in the middle of the train scene.
Well, it's not about that. It's just a matter of suddenly understanding why he would fall in love with her, which is what no one was so implausible up to that point.
Well, that's what got me in the movie, because it was plausible in the movie, at least to me anyway, I believed it. And if you remember, the train scene is quite horrifying in the movie. She goes completely hysterical and starts screaming in a railway station.
Let's talk about that dress.
Look at
I was about to
That's my
say another
favorite.
dress.
That's
Another
my favorite
Marin
one.
dress.
There was like a big cake.
Does
Yes,
anybody know
confection.
about, I don't know if this belongs on this DVD, Hermione Gingold used to do vaudeville turns and things like she was in reviews, and she came out in front of the curtain in one of her reviews in a dress like that, and she started to sing an old English folk song. And as she did so, a little boy on a bicycle came from the wings and stopped in front of her, and he took a bottle of milk out and put it in front of her, and a hand reached out from under the thing, took the fresh bottle, and put an empty bottle out. The boy put the little empty bottle in the basket and rode off, and she never stopped singing.
I suppose we had no moments like that in Passion. No. We certainly had the dress. Or
Are
you
those
did,
costumes
Marin.
hard to wear?
They're heavy. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the
Don't
thing.
you remember Jan
And-
was really on your case about not
letting it, and I was watching that. As I watched it, I was like, oh God, I was belling. I had to take such teeny steps to try and not get it to
Liberty Bell.
Shift its
to
yeah.
shift its
Oh,
weight.
that
Swing its
was-
way.
Because you just want to be so that you're floating, but it was very, very hard to execute.
You used a
obviously.
skateboard eventually.
Yeah,
didn't you?
skateboard. That was it. Roller skates.
You get the trooper award between the dresses, the mic in the head.
Stupidity is their excuse, as ugliness is mine. But what is yours? I've watched you from my window. I saw you on the day that you arrived. Perhaps it was the way you walked.
Oh, Donna, there's that beautiful low register you've got. What a wonderful vocal quality.
And then there are the Eddie Munster eyebrows.
My extensions. We extended the inner part of my brow.
They did at one point join, I think, didn't they? Did you have a little Frida Kahlo moment going on there? And we spent so much time with your makeup. That's where you were the trooper of the year, trying to put a mold.
As the run went on, the musicians in the pit make jokes and puns. The puns on warts and drawing. One of them, kept drawing Donna different wart things. I mean, it became, it kept the musicians going when they weren't playing.
I think for our Broadway Cast thing, didn't we do like they had boxes
Oh.
of moles, Fosca's moles?
I have one with me.
Yes,
Kelly-
I
little
actually
moles.
brought one to show you.
That was
all.
Kelly, the makeup
Yeah, the
artist,
makeup
who
artist. She
made all these
she
little
made all those-
kitschy
yes.
mole
Mole
kits.
things.
God, the sets are beautiful. They really are.
Such
so
a painting.
wonderful.
Such a painting.
Adrienne LaBelle, sort of inspired by a combination of Turner, watercolors,
Yeah.
and Rothko's.
Oh, I didn't get the Rothko connection. The Turner I
Mostly
got.
Turner.
It's on fire.
It's nothing.
Oh my hand, I always have 104.
Yes.
It's nothing.
What do you suppose that metal around his neck is for? Acting?
Ballast.
Ballast.
There was something I remember those costumes being made and hand-made in Italy.
No, all the men's costumes were
The
made in
men's,
Italy.
right?
Yeah.
Really?
All the boots, our
uniforms?
boots were made in Italy. Our shoes were made in Italy.
Why? I hate to ask it because they were cheaper.
It was the color. It was the
fabric.
specific fabric
I
and
believe it
what
was the fabric.
what
My
the color
gosh.
of the blue and the red.
Well,
I
Jane
think.
Greenwood was right. I mean, she said they know how to make exact. And in fact, when those things for the men arrived, they were basically just fit perfectly, as I
Wow.
recall.
Jane really is just an unbelievable
Jane
Unbelievable.
designer and artist.
Yeah.
Was that much more expensive to get that?
No, it was cheaper. We just brought the Italian
Oh,
guy.
Donna,
over.
you're not happy.
And remember all
He's going
how many
away.
times you had the hat on, didn't have the hat on, you know, because in those days the soldiers always had the hats on.
Oh,
It was
that's
such a
right.
pain in the ass for lighting, for sound. So
'Cause you had a mic in the hat too, didn't you? Have a mic in that hat?
They tried all sorts of configurations. Ultimately, it stayed in my hair, and I just have to lift my hat off instead of kind
I
of
don't-
whipping it off to
I
the
don't
side.
think we had. Did we do mics? I don't think we did mics when we shot it though.
No, there's no mics.
Yeah,
No, I'm not
it's
seeing
So
them.
much better. So much better.
Does that mean you recorded it? You recorded the soundtrack separately?
No,
No.
we just had mics.
Just
above
acoustic.
the
Just,
head,
yeah.
yeah.
You promised me your friendship, Giorgio.
I mean, it's a very unusual way to shoot something because we had a live orchestra, as I
Mhm.
recall, too,
Yes.
not a track.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And having to match up things.
This was a pretty intense scene coming up. The letter, the hiding of the letter, and the
Right.
Giorgio's place setting.
She's a wacky gal, let's face it. This letter is pretty wacky. But that's why lighting was so key, because so many of the moments were kind of out of reality, like when she grabs his hand. It's such a strange moment.
Why is there only one wine glass filled on the table? Now there isn't. Bill Parry seems to have been sneaking some off.
And she's drinking her cup of joe.
Latte.
Keep the energy up.
It's our little upper.
It's a self-serve table.
And what was in those glasses? Cherry juice?
You know, what do they use for wine?
Grape juice.
Grape juice.
Yeah.
I would think grape juice would dry up the interior mouth. Grape juice makes you pucker, at least makes me pucker.
When no one speaks of horses or women, I will surrender.
These table scenes are just a bitch to stage.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
Really. There we go.
Please,
You must read my letter.
let go of my hand.
Donna's got a strong grip.
Tell me about it.
Pass the salt, please.
He muscles you into a bed.
Not out.
And they were sticky, I recall.
Yes, right.
Where have those hands been?
Only on opening night.
Well, when you have 104 all the time.
Put a lot of salt on his food.
I've received a letter today.
I received a letter today. Must be another song.
If you had asked me this in my office, I might have refused.
It's interesting. I don't know if you did any research, James, but is he the only one without facial hair?
Well, he had his.
Well, he had the beard, I think, at the beginning of.
But I mean, I wondered if everybody had beards in those days.
Yeah, I mean, we did do a lot of research, obviously. They usually had some facial hair of some kind. Not necessarily everyone.
I had a young girl on the train on the way home accuse me of being a werewolf.
Oh,
One
with
day
those,
after the performance, just with the mutton chops, you know.
Oh.
She got off the train and did, "You're a werewolf." She was reading comic books. She was about 14 years old.
Oh, that's sweet. Oop, just one mole left. Actually, it looks more like a beauty spot. If anything,
They
it
did
enhances her
shrink
looks.
too, didn't they? They started big. Didn't we have you
Color
had big
change,
ones?
pigmentation changes.
Big, pretty big ones.
And then, of course, there were a few nights that they fell off my face during the
Into the soup.
performance. Into the soup. Rolling, rolling, rolling. Keep those moles rolling.
The marching soldier songs are the hard ones to write. The so-called occasionally comic relief or just relief.
Well, these were mostly just reprieves.
I know, but my point being relief is, from the three voices.
This
We also
was.
have
Sorry, go ahead, Ira.
Just was going to say they have a sense of commentary too.
Oh, sure.
It's like
Oh,
a
sure.
great
Yeah.
chorus commentary. Donna, what were you going to say?
Well, I think I auditioned with this scene as well. There was this little scene I seem to remember.
The dog scene.
Oh, it's another very, very intense scene to watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Throwing yourself. At
This
him
is a
like
place
dog.
where the audience would occasionally laugh.
Laugh, totally.
They just, we live in an era where people will not take emotions larger than life.
No.
They'll accept it in opera because everything in opera is so ridiculous, but they won't accept it when people are actually speaking words in coherent sentences.
But the show's very threatening. It's just a really
Mhm.
threatening show,
Sure.
and people unbear them,
Right.
are so
Um,
naked in
it
their
is so
emotions.
much easier to laugh.
Not only that, you said before, James, it was a show that had no applause breaks in it, so there was
no
release. No time for anybody to really be anything but intensely
No.
involved in what was going on.
And that, of course, was deliberate. I think that was probably my choice more than James'.
It's surprising this hasn't been done in opera houses. It just seems like such a... I always thought it...
I think it will be. It's partly because it was not a popular show. Sweeney, though, Sweeney Todd, though it didn't, it was hardly a big hit. In fact, it lost money, but it ran quite a while and made a kind of popular reputation. Also, it's got a plot that makes people go ooh and ah, and lots of blood and that sort of thing. And this is about the intensity of emotions. It's different.
Remember, you had more music. We actually took... When we were doing the workshop, there was...
Was there
more sung through, and actually you were wise in saying that we needed the dialogue to kind of give it a little bit of a break from the music.
Yeah.
But the dialogue is very musical, particularly musical in this show, I think. And
But
it's
James
also
writes musical dialogue. He does in Sunday in the Park with Giorgio also. I mean, it's poetry. It's
very attentive to the thematic structure. I mean, you have phrases that come back and ideas that come back the same way.
James
the
does the
music
same
does.
thing with books that a composer does with scores. He has words that repeat themselves and have different nuances and different, always resonances, whether the audience realizes them or not, which is exactly what you do with chords and small motivic ideas in music.
Did you... Now
Is this the only trio, by the way? I think my recollections is the only time the three of you, Donna, Jere, and Marin, sing together.
The one now in the garden, they sing together too, in the garden
That's true.
stroll.
Yeah.
Did you write, before I finished the book, did you start writing the score? Do you remember?
Before you finish? Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
Before I
Oh,
finished.
sure.
And did you write chronologically, or did you jump
Yeah,
around?
no, I wrote chronologically. As usual, I sort of followed you. No, this is not the kind of show where you can jump around chronologically, or the kind of score, because it is all about the development of themes, and they start to flower and then deflower. And no, because it's not a number show. In a number show, you can sometimes skip around. I don't like to do it anyway, because.
You've done it in other shows, some of them.
Yeah, but I don't like to, and I try not to, and most of the time it's in pretty chronological order.
Right.
I mean, in Sunday in the Park with George, yes, the first song I wrote was It's Hot Up Here, but that's because I had that idea to do that number. But then I started at the beginning.
When we did the workshop, I remember there was a constant, we were thrilled constantly because there was always material coming in every day.
Right.
And we would often stage a scene as a scene without music. I remember this with the garden scene, and when they hear drums came in, I mean, I don't know how much, if there was some of the music that we had, but I remember we'd staged it, and I was amazed that very little, if anything, had to change.
Right.
I don't remember
it was
throwing much
such...
out at all in the show. We pretty much...
No,
it just grew, but it didn't actually... We didn't chuck much.
No.
It was a very,
I think the hardest part, well, certainly to write and decide on, etc., was the flashback.
Right.
And we even, after the workshop, we even had a discussion of whether there should be a flashback or not. I remember John Guare, the playwright, and Louis Malle, the movie director, came together.
I remember
and at
that.
the end of it, I said, listen, James and I are really in some kind of quandary. You think we should keep the flashback in? And simultaneously, John Guare said, absolutely not, and Louis Malle said, absolutely. Or vice versa. No help at all, but they couldn't have disagreed more simultaneously.
Count Ludovic coming up.
Yes.
Not yet. Not quite yet. Not quite yet. But I thought James wanted the whole flashback sequence. Though this is, yet to come, so I suppose it's not appropriate to talk about it now, but he wanted it to be its own kind of like mini operetta, which might have been a really wonderful. I couldn't do that. I just couldn't solve it. But the whole idea that the flashback would be maybe an entirely different style of music and approach and lyrics and be like a little inset piece, which is, I think, probably a terrific idea, and I couldn't manage it.
This is my favorite scene in the show.
Oh,
He
no
said- he
kidding.
said
You
modestly.
loved rehearsing the scene. And remember didn't we did some great like little theater games playing with.
Really? Oh, the letter or something. No, theater games, those were the days. We don't do those anymore.
Well, it's interesting. There's a line.
Sorry.
No. All right. Well, because there's a line in this scene. We can still take hands, she said, as opposed to shake hands. And
Yes, take
that would
hands.
always, and that kind of formality of writing is what characterizes a certain subtlety in what James did in both this show and in Sunday in the
Well,
Park
that was
with George.
really from the book on here. The book was written in that style.
Well, but Sunday in the Park with George, you did the same thing where the whole thing feels vaguely like a translation from the French.
But every word is chosen so carefully. There's not a
Exactly.
wasted
Exactly.
moment
Yeah,
or
right. Must have
note
driven you
or
crazy
word in
rehearsing
this in this show.
This is one of those scenes that as a writer you have it so clear in your head where the beats are.
And we never got it, did we?
Really? Explain what you mean. Tell, because I wasn't aware of that this was so difficult to either rehearse or.
I don't remember so much, but I do remember. I always thought it was kind of a key scene because she's
Well,
so
it is.
great. I love her in this scene.
Mhm.
It's really
Well, it's
bitch-
when you think
bitch
she's
mama
finally
coming
when you think she's finally accepted the reality of the moment, but
Well, she's putting her
course she
down, and then
hasn't.
of course the moment of the scene is when she finds out he's married.
Yeah.
I mean that he has his
That's
girlfriend is
what-
married.
I love the line. We all deal with our pride the way we must, the way we all
As
do
best,
our best
we
we
can.
can.
Best we can.
Best we
Yes.
can.
Oh, look at that reaction shot.
Mm-hmm.
Great. No, I just don't like this scene.
Also, the way Jere's sitting so stiffly and
know.
uncomfortably is so
Poor
good.
guy. Lamb being led to the slaughter.
It hardly matters. And is your angel also?
Ooh,
Here it
Yeah.
is.
The dig.
Yeah.
The sting.
It's tasteful.
I have many flaws, Captain.
Our situation has been well.
Were you actually doing any needlepoint? I'm sorry, I got to ask. Were you
I
actually
was
making
trying.
something?
Not very well. I mean, somebody showed me how, and I did my best, but
I see.
I couldn't.
But you weren't actually following a design? You
Well,
were just-
I was trying to.
Oh, you weren't. Okay, so there
But
was a design. So I was going to
there-
ask, what was it?
there-
A single rose? What was it?
It was some kind of a floral.
You won.
But the thing is, I thought she would be excellent at it, and I never got to the point where I was excellent at it.
That's
So I
actually
had
where
to
I found
behave.
pity.
It was a small window
Look
of
at that.
vulnerability.
Look at that moment. Look at
Oh,
that.
light in the dark. Well, Clara means light, doesn't it? In
That's right.
Italian,
And
Fosca
Fosca
means
means
dark.
dark.
It's a-
Obfuscate.
And Giorgio means fickle slut, I think. That's my wife's nickname for the character.
on another
I
dress.
gotta say,
Another dress.
you didn't get to keep any of these, did you? Did you,
No.
Marin? What happens to costumes like that?
They said they were shipping all these to England. That's what they told me.
Oh, for the British production.
yes.
Were they? Did they? I don't
Because there's a
remember.
coat that comes up that I wanted.
Somewhere they're
I also
being
wanted
done
my peignoir in the opening.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
good.
that was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Too.
Nice for your honeymoon.
Yeah.
Wow.
I can see what you mean about walking there.
Strong in my thoughts.
This was the scene. This was between that scene and this was the infamous night when Jere had to pee. And it was now at this point.
That when did he get off
This
stage?
he just that exit he had was the scene with
I was
Donna.
late for this one.
And he was late for this scene.
I almost ran.
And it was
off
critic.
stage.
It was critic night. It was critic night. And he went off in that. You went off in that little place in the alley.
I had.
He went over to JR's.
I had passed out in the Starlight Deli, and my wife was in the hospital with premature labor, and we were up all night long. I hadn't eaten, probably hadn't drank anything in probably about 16 hours, and finally it hit me in the deli picking up a sandwich on the way into the theater. Hit the floor in the deli, passed out. And the stage management just said, "Here, drink all this, drink all this Gatorade, 2 bottles of Gatorade." I said, "I don't usually drink anything 2 hours before the show because I have no time to get rid of it." And it was a nightmare. I was out in the alley between the two theaters.
Between the two theaters, yeah.
Waiting and waiting. The scene before, I thought I was going to tip over in my chair.
Well, it happens to be one of those parts like Hamlet where you're almost,
Yeah.
well, not even Hamlet, where you're almost never off the stage.
Yeah. 2
Just,
hours.
I go off to get more clothes put on.
Yeah, that's right.
This is like being chased by a jealous husband the whole show. You're just going, hey, put this on, put this on, get out, go, 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 put this on.
It's always like that in a musical. Somehow the backstage choreography is always more interesting than the onstage. Or intricate, I should say. I love this line the doctor says, you have only words. You only have to give her words that will make her well.
Doesn't he? I think James liked it so much he reprised it at the end, didn't he? Isn't that part of the little
Yes.
set
Oh, it was
of
one of
reprises
the
at the very end?
resonances, yeah.
Oh, she knows of this business?
You cannot imagine what this has cost her.
Tom looks very distinguished.
Yeah,
Very
His
distinguished.
eyes are.
not too Italian. but
No,
they're
I was going to say,
Northern Italian.
no, it's
Northern.
called Lincoln's
Northern,
right-hand man.
Don't do it now.
And if I go, what next? What will she ask of me tomorrow or next week? You speak of what a
Jerry has a profile like a Roman coin, a little bit.
Strong cheeks.
I know I came down here for a reason. Every 5 years I get an ego boost.
You need it more often than that, Jerry.
No need to be frightened. It is Giorgio.
I never thought that you would come.
This is an important scene, isn't it?
To
The
put it
bedroom
mildly.
scene.
The bedroom.
I remember when in the workshop when the letter came in about midway through the workshop, midway through the show.
You mean Marin and reading?
No, Fosca's letter that she
Song.
dictates.
I wish I could
that she
forget
Oh, the
it.
letter
dictates to,
song. Oh, it was in the workshop that I
Giorgio,
wrote this?
Yes, in the
Yes.
middle of the workshop.
Goodness gracious.
I think we were. It was a breathtaking.
And I'd
thing to
written
hear
stuff
at
after
first.
it? Or was this
Yes.
in order? I'd written stuff after
We were
it.
going somewhat chronologically in the workshop, and we're about
Yeah.
4 weeks duration, and about 2 weeks into it, literally midway, this
God.
was written.
How long a workshop was it? 4 weeks?
4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah.
Because what's interesting about that is that thematically it's so tied into all the other things.
It's
of the show.
crucial, isn't it? And it's a
But
it's
for
a
that whole
plot-
thing,
major plot point.
is is one of the motifs that generates the show.
Rest your feet on the bed.
Is it hard to sing lying down, Donna? I suppose that's a loaded question because the answer is, of course it is. But
You know, it was about finding the angle to be visible enough, to have my head and face visible enough, and still seem weak, you know, and not supporting my body. You know, it was that was the juggle. And I remember we kept rearranging those pillows to try to get support in the right place and not have my head look like it was, I don't know, at some bizarre angle.
that moment where Giorgio sits on the bed was another moment where the audience always giggled, but probably
he
it was a
put
good
his
giggle
feet
when he
up,
put his
right.
feet up.
Yeah,
I
but
want you to be
you
more
know,
comfortable.
I-
I think
I-
it's probably right. A good giggle.
Well, it was hard.
And
to
you
make
had
it
to address that because you actually changed. I remembered because I wrote it down. You changed a line from "put your feet up" to "rest your feet." Just that. I remember it used to get a laugh when he said, "And
Oh, it's got the kind of contemporary.
Well, Steve and I
Yeah.
remember we'd go out after those first few previews for drinks, and you were great. You'd write down every place that it was like putting out
Red
fires.
flags,
Yeah,
red
where
flags.
they'd laugh, we'd rewrite it, and then the next night they'd laugh in 7 other places.
right.
You know, and then after a
But
while,
after about a week,
I couldn't figure some of that out. Remember, there was a character, Colonel Revolti. or
Yes, well,
something.
because they thought the word was revolting.
I didn't know. Why are they laughing every
That's
time they say
revolting. It was
that?
very clear. That was good.
That was a character from the novel.
Yep.
This was where she said she was going to leave him her hair, wasn't it?
The old hair.
This, you see her braids, I think, at some point. You see them.
Yeah.
We used to.
Well, how did you
used to-
guys feel on stage previewing the show? Must have been really a bitch, huh?
Well, there was that awful night when, in the storm scene, when they screamed with laughter when he came back to lift her up.
You were,
Yeah.
if you had any qualms, you were very kind in not sharing them with me, as I recall.
You know, in the moment, I remember that night in the storm scene. I can't remember whether the laughter started when I actually went down, when I had, the seizure, whatever, and went down, or when he came back or turned to come back. But I remember when I hit the floor, and I heard, and it's not like it was 50 people who were laughing. There only needed to be 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but they were enough, and it was a very audible and palpable thing. And I remember thinking, I just wish the floor would open up and take me down.
Wow.
But I think part of it was that, for me, I couldn't understand. I mean, this is perhaps a kind of vanity or ego. I couldn't understand why they didn't get what was
But don't you remember
what the
that,
need was.
that dress rehearsal on Broadway was a shockaroonie.
Yeah, that was-
It was playing like a comedy, and it was like, and then I thought, well, it's dress rehearsal maybe, and then the next night it continued. It was
Right.
like, whoa, we're doing one show and they're making it another.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but the other thing is that I never panicked about it. First of all, I knew you guys were addressing it. I knew that I felt, that it was being taken care of. That we were.
It's because we had taken care of other moments. So this one was, as James said, a brand new one, but you knew by that time that we were addressing those things because
Right.
we had addressed some successfully.
Right.
There was an edge that I was aware that we were obviously on, because the fact was it wasn't a trend that was going in the audience. There were, like you say, isolated people who would make these comments, and then there would always be someone hissing at them at the same
Right,
time. So you
right.
knew there was an
Very
edge would
polarized.
tip one way or the other.
Listen, I, on more than one occasion, I shouldn't say on more than one, but on at least one occasion, I sat there, and 2 guys in front of me started to laugh at the stage, and then they laughed, and then they turned around to see what my reaction was. They were laughing for my benefit. That's why they did it.
Well, they didn't know who I was, and I was like a maniac by the end of previous. I literally got up one night, walked 2 rows behind me, leaned over 3 people, and told the lady, "Get the fuck out of the theater."
Good for you.
I said, "Just, you don't like it, fine, just get the
Yeah,
fuck
just get out.
The problem was there was no intermission for people who didn't like it to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was so hard to be.
Did she leave?
No, she went racing to all the ushers looking for me after the show.
Oh, God!
I felt like I was 12 again.
No,
back
I
in
wish
China.
you'd confronted her and just.
But she was just
slammed
giggling
her.
and laughing and talking to the whole thing. She was just thought the whole thing was. But see, that's what I was saying. I think it touches people
It
Well,
really,
that's
in
that's
a
the
way
thing
that
about
really
it.
disrupted their equilibrium somehow.
It did,
yeah.
and it was that was the thing. No one left the theater, where are we going to eat? Not like most shows. I mean, it really did. It got people.
Well, there would be
Polarized
people
people.
arguing after.
Yes,
I remember,
fighting in the house.
Yeah, a lot of arguments. But once we opened, it settled down because people sort of knew what they were coming to, and it had been in some fashion endorsed or not, and the right audience came. But that was the worst preview period I've ever had.
It was scary.
Really,
It
really.
was scary. We had a similar thing with Anyone Can Whistle, which had almost as many previews as performances. But a curtain call, somebody in the second row hissed, and Harry Gardino, the leading man, held his hand up with his middle finger up, and a guy turned around in the first row and hit the guy in the second row.
Jesus.
Oh, goodness.
And they started a fist fight. That's called polarizing an audience.
Wow.
I left.
The other thing that was tricky is that because she was a character that should make you uncomfortable,
Yeah.
that how much we compromised that, the balance, the negotiation of that was just a delicate thing. And, I remember at that time thinking about how much I always use an audience to tell me at least what people are getting, not necessarily to tell me what to do, but and it was tricky.
So did you have to block that out in this particular show? There was
Did I block it out? There was some radar that was out, but it didn't stop
You never
me.
pulled back,
you
though,
know?
which was great about, the three of you were
Maybe I
all
should have pulled back a little.
supportive.
Well,
no, I don't think so.
That's the show's about big, not about small.
But I think, Donna, the commitment you gave everyone, and particularly you, Donna, the commitment you gave to this character was unique, I think, in the theater.
I don't think there's any other way to play it.
I agree.
I know.
No, it's
I
true.
certainly compliment Donna,
Well,
but I can't imagine
the notes I
anybody pulling back.
Yeah, but what I was getting from people was, I won't name names. Oh, she's too unattractive. Make her more attractive. Let her become beautiful at
Name
the
names.
end.
Name names
No, I
for
won't
DVD.
name names. But
can
it was
edit it out.
kind of amazing to me that people in the business were calling up, because of course everyone has notes when you're in previews, but it seemed so ridiculous to me.
No, it's true.
Steve, did you know that this would be reprised at the end? That this would turn on itself as a plot point?
Oh yes, oh sure, oh yeah. You mean about well, sure, because the plot was that the letter would be discovered, so I knew that we'd have to. But in fact, I think the last song was not this.
No, I remember we put the ending together in the workshop with just what we had. We didn't.
Yeah,
really
there was a. I'm trying to remember what it would have been. When we get to the ending, I'll probably remember. Ask me again. Yeah, I don't remember, but no, this turned out to be very useful.
Now, I haven't seen many productions, but in London, they did it as 2 acts, and
Is this where they took the intermission?
Yeah, I took the intermission.
Really a mistake.
Well, it
is a
was
mis-
very slow paced. The other thing about this show, as I generally tend to do it, we really paced it pretty tight. And then, of course, you see other people do these things, and they go.
Well,
on
it's a slow-moving show. There is not a lot of.
There's a lot of
musically. It's it's a rhapsody. There's very little.
Well, there are a lot of transitions
energetic
too,
music.
and if you don't figure out design-wise how to get from A to B to C, it can really slow you down.
No, it's got to be dissolves. Lots of dissolves.
I think the recent Kennedy Center production was about 10 minutes longer than ours.
No kidding.
Yeah, maybe even more. Well, you had put in a song, the additional song.
Oh, the climactic song you didn't want me to put in, right?
Right.
We'll get to that later.
Yes, we will. I don't think Jere should know about it.
No, I think
I did it. I got to do it.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, that's right. You did. That's right. You did.
That's why I wasn't in.
No.
There she comes.
Okay, here it comes.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Not so good for the voice. Everyone.
I had to work on that with
That's
Joan
not so
later.
good
Got
for
the
the
big
voice.
bucks for.
I think the listeners might like to know that the early screams are not from you, because if you'd done all those offstage screams.
We pre-recorded them, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was another girl.
No, you recorded
No, we
that.
They were
we
recorded sound
pre-recorded
cues.
them.
Speaking of transitions, when did you write this? Steve, do you remember when you wrote the I'll Say Soldiers
No, I
sequences?
don't honestly remember.
I know there was
I know
Broadway.
James wanted. Yeah, I know James wanted some comic moments, and I didn't. And this is my feeble
There were-
attempt at a comic moment. And
These are among the few musical sections that are rhymed and.
yeah, right. Well, that's why they're rhymed. They're
Well, I
rhymed. in an
remember I
attempt to
wanted
get
a
some-
comic thing for relief, because we
Yeah,
didn't
I
have
know.
any applause.
I understand.
And also, I wanted characters who could feel about Fosca the way some of the audience felt about Fosca.
Well, it was
So-
very smart of you, I guess. I wanted it to be a completely relentless show, audience unfriendly. I mean, I really did want it to be relentless, and so I didn't want the comic relief, and I'm sure I was wrong. I'm not sure I was wrong, but I think I was wrong. and it's hard, it's hard to find comedy, well, even in some roistering soldiers.
Just a bit aloof, don't you think? Not around the
When I saw the show in D.C.
Oh, you did?
and which was a whole
Very brave.
wild experience. I remember for the first time having like a sliver of objectivity about it, just like little tiny glimmers of it. And I remember thinking, I certainly knew when Fosca was going to enter, and I too even went, "Dear God, there she is again." Interesting, you use the word relentlessness, even with the soldiers. You know, the sort of the relentlessness of their days and the bleakness of their surroundings, as beautiful as they were painted, you know, in our productions. But that and the mounting sense of that. And then the payoff at the end, emotionally, and the fact that there is no release was huge.
So this is the flashback sequence
about to happen.
Yes.
And here come the parents.
I remember there was, I think you did tighten it quite a bit, Steve, and turned it much more musically than it was originally. There was a lot more dialogue interspersed.
A lot of trouble writing this, because this is one of those things where you want to give information and still make it seem like part of the rest of the show. And this show is not about information. And it's about taking, moments and expanding them. And here you got to say, well, I was born and then I had these parents, and the Count came along, and I didn't know my father. He introduced me, and wait a minute. It's really hard to do without making it discursive. And so I had to use the character, the Colonel, a lot to narrate, but he's narrating an awful lot of facts. And also, I wanted to give it some interest without confusing the audience, and that's hard. I mean, in other words, is Fosca singing now, or is she singing to the parents then? That kind of thing, which I think I did not solve entirely. I think there are aspects, particularly at the beginning of the sequence, that are confusing. I think once Ludovic enters, it then becomes clear what's going on.
I have to say, I loved playing it as an actor, though, and sort of the merging of the times and memory.
Well, it also
and
gave you something else to play, other colors to play.
Absolutely.
What she was as a young woman.
Did we put a flower on you or some such strange thing?
Instead of a wart?
I don't remember if it's
What, in my hair or something at some point, maybe?
Make it look.
There were constant references to flowers in this show.
Yes, that's absolutely.
For this DVD, we sort of bleached out the color here.
An interest in my cousin.
If I had known you were here, Signorina,
If he had known, of course he knew.
I would have brought you many flowers.
If I had known,
You do like flowers.
I should have known.
I've seen you at your window.
Won't you stay for dinner?
Do, yes. I've watched you every day since I arrived.
I had my suspicion.
I had no suspicion.
I chose not to
The
see.
way you move, the way you gaze at the sky.
For love had made me blind.
How could I be so
For
blind?
what I took for love.
Within a month, he had asked for her hand.
Signora Fosca has been married?
Yes.
Austria, Count Ludovic of Austria. I sense.
Oh, yeah.
She's not a virgin.
Well, thank God, some choreography. for those of you who are seeing this for the first time, you've just seen the big dance number. It's all over. I hope you enjoyed it. We had terrible trouble getting a choreographer that.
In the film or the book, I don't remember which. I remember reading something about in Fosca's history that she'd married this guy and had a baby. And
Yes,
the
she
baby
had
was
a baby,
stillborn,
that's right.
And there were a number of other nuances
Absolutely.
in her history.
It's interesting. James, I was so taken with the movie, and that's what I wanted to do. And James was very determined that the show should be based on the book rather than the movie. Not because I assume not because he disliked the movie, but because it was freer somehow. I mean, James is not used to adapting other people's work. I'm speaking for you, James, but I'm trying to open it. I'm trying to open up the conversation.
But didn't the film have a slightly different tone too? I think.
You know what's odd about the film? I went back and read. This was maybe after we had already put the show up, or Vincent Canby's review of the movie, which he called it a comedy.
A black comedy.
Black
as I
Black
remember.
comedy.
I didn't see the black.
It's very broad, very.
I didn't find the movie a comedy when I saw it.
Nor did I. But, when we were talking about the audience laughing unwarrantedly, I don't think there's any possibility of that, even that same audience laughing at the movie because the woman was so frightening looking that they were able to divorce themselves from her, is my guess. When you see somebody that grotesque, you think, oh, it's a story about them. But you see somebody like Donna, and there is, Donna is a version in many ways of many of the people in the audience, There's something inhuman about the woman in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also a foreign film too. It's just
Yeah,
very
it
hard
helps.
to
It helps.
distance it. You know.
Your parents. Forgive me, my dear, but
Don't you dare.
Where is Count Ludovic from?
Austria.
Right.
Austria.
And yes, we haven't paid the rent since July, just so you know.
There's the accent.
It is.
Oh yeah. Like Bat Masterson.
But it's true, James. You want to? Can you expand any further on why you were so determined? Because in many of our discussions, it would come up that you were so determined.
Well, I didn't actually wasn't that interested in doing the show.
I know that
from the movie, and then when I read the book,
that's what
I found the book really involving in a way that the movie I didn't have your response to the movie. The book I really enjoyed the book.
We had it translated by a professor, very academically, and then about 2 years later, out came a translation of it, not by this guy, but to somebody else. Also, it's a very 19th century novel. It's not easy reading.
Well, it was written as they did in those days, as in chapters that were published, weekly or every other weekend, serialized in magazines and whatnot.
Why interfere? Or was I just relieved to know that somebody would want her for a wife? In war, you know the enemy.
And my French waltz finally gets in there. Yum, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. It's the only chance I have.
Poor Jere has to listen so much to the show.
That's true.
That's
true. Did that ever occur to you? Not serious.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just the physical requirements of standing still
and constant and looking interested
and listening,
and caring, right?
Yeah.
But everybody's yapping
Of course,
at you all the time.
I'd forgotten that he's on stage all the time. And he does a lot of listening.
As long as you're a man, you're what the world will make of you. Whereas if you're a
I just remember having to have a stool dragged out for me during rehearsals for this. Because my back would go, and I'd have a brace on, and this and that.
Did you have a bad back before the show started? Or
No, I didn't.
So what was it in the show that did this? I mean, having to stand so much? What was it that caused your back? Because there isn't an
I had to lift a colleague.
Ms. Fosca.
I had to lift a colleague.
So that's what did it. Oh my gosh! No, I'm sorry. Well, the audience will see it soon. Oh my goodness! I forgot.
Was this where Clara finds her gray hair?
Oh, you look
Yes.
so beautiful, Marin.
I remember the day you wrote this. I remember first hearing this. Yeah, up in that room, up 890.
Oh my gosh!
And going up and learning this, and just loving this.
I forgot. So therefore, how much of the score would you say? I'd forgotten how much of the score was left to write by the time we started rehearsals. Half, third? What was it?
Well, the workshop, I would say there was about
Workshop. I'm talking about workshop.
about 65% of it.
lot
I
of
think
it
was
was
by the end of the
By
workshop.
the end of the workshop.
But a lot was written during the workshop.
Oh, it was all
right?
written during the workshop. I remember going into casting, we had very little to go on in the way of actual pages to give us clues about who to bring in for casting and what to have them do. Maybe 4 or 5 pages and a couple of musical themes, I read and Happiness.
Well, one of the things that had happened was that I had started on Muscle before this, I think.
Yeah, I don't
Yep,
remember.
yeah. And then abandoned it because I couldn't solve it.
Well, you were probably wise in that regard. You know, it's frustrating, this tape. I'm realizing we could never do a wide shot of the stage when we shot this because we had so little time. And because our cameras were so close to get this kind of shot, we didn't use long lenses. We couldn't get a camera for a wide shot. In a way, it's okay for this show because it's so intense, and that's about as wide as we're ever.
So internal, too.
Yeah.
There's so much intimacy in it.
But you do want to just
It's
sort of open up
Yes,
sometimes.
just for variety.
Right. Like that last sequence would have been nice to have seen
To see
wide
everybody
shot.
on stage.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
This could be, it's a fun movie, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Make a movie of passion.
Let me call Ed Rascola and see what he does.
Shoot it in Central Park. And,
Remember when he came to see the show?
I was,
And his
unfortunately, I was
lady?
not here, and then you met her.
And she came
Yes,
too.
I saw a photograph. What was that?
Teeny little petite.
were they gracious? And
They were
Oh,
very
they loved
gracious.
They were so.
I didn't understand a
sweet.
word they said,
I didn't
of
either, but
course.
They smiled a lot.
They touched their hearts a lot.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
they
oh,
did.
that's
And
lovely.
They,
Oh, that's
Yeah.
they,
oh,
seemed,
that's
they
wonderful.
were very enthusiastic.
I'm so sorry I
This
missed
was
that.
another laugh moment.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Why people would laugh at that, I never quite
Well,
got.
her relentless
It's the fact she
pursuit
came
of
in.
him.
It's when she shows up. Every time she shows up, the audience started to laugh. They just will not accept the fact that she would pursue him.
You know that on 3 or 4 occasions I had women on the street or in a ladies' room, I remember very specifically, physically grab me and tell me how much they hated this woman.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do with that information?
It was kind of shocking.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these women, I will just say, in terms of my first impression, were
Of course.
not the steadiest of gals, you know.
No.
My guess is that they were a
I had
lot
a guy
like
follow me
her.
home on the train to tell me how angry he was and why the show will close soon
Followed you home.
because of the nudity.
Oh,
Oh.
Someone sat next to me on the train. I said,
He was
"You
upset.
got to move now."
That there wasn't more.
He followed me. Long train ride.
No.
Oh my.
Yeah, no.
I loved playing this scene
I did
with
too.
you. There was
This,
there
this
was
I love this
Giuliani
passage of dialogue.
with the bird calls from the pit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
This is not my favorite scene.
I know it
No.
not Jay. I like it.
You know so much. One of my least favorite lines.
I know a woman shouldn't ask such a thing.
I think Jerry likes it because he's sitting down.
Women do. So I ask you for a kiss.
Did you ever wear that hat, or?
me, that
Yeah.
hat.
I
think-
thought you're going to come on the train in that hat, right?
I don't know if it's
In
the
the
same
garden? Is
hat.
that
I
the
think
one
when
we
she
did
designed it,
different?
I just said I thought it would be off my head by the time I'd gotten to him.
Right.
It would have fallen off my head.
Donna, did you just have the one costume and the red dress?
No, believe it or not, there are several
Oh, there are
different
different
dresses
dresses,
there. I
yeah.
mean, they're subtle. I think
They're great, those dresses.
Yeah.
But they're all sort of beautifully
I have to say,
dark.
we've made
Fabrics.
very few changes in the costumes once they arrived in the show.
Yeah.
And that's unusual.
yeah.
for a
Really
musical.
unusual, particularly for me, because I'm not that great with costumes. It's usually just about who wore what when, but no, I don't remember having very many problems at all with costumes.
Was this the most difficult song to sing, Jerry? Because I remember.
This was the most challenging.
Yeah, because there are little transitions in it that are rhythmically very clumsy that I couldn't solve.
It's one of those trains when you fall off, you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
him at the pass.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I remember when
After all these years, I apologize.
No, but I remember when we decided to write this song, it was also, I think it might have come in previews, I'm not sure.
Yes.
Just the need to have this guy say fuck off
Yep.
to you.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's one of the last things I wrote.
Yeah.
And he uses the theme again later. The same.
Well, I'd
idea.
set that up from the beginning. I set up 3 or 4 themes to keep constantly using and reusing them.
I have to say I was grateful for this
Yeah.
opportunity to
To
let
explode.
off steam.
Well,
and
because
it
you've
was,
been listening all night, it's nice for you to
Yeah.
have a little something to say. And what you say is great. It also sets up the fact that you might fall in love with her.
Mhm.
There you go, girl.
I always found this particularly touching when he came back to pick her up.
She's remembered something, Donna.
that's what
I
I'm
remember.
remembering. It wasn't that they laughed; it's that they.
That's it.
I
That's
remember
it.
that,
That's
yeah.
it. That's
That
it.
was
That's
it.
right. They applauded.
And that's when I said, "Just
no, yeah.
take me down."
Oh yes, that's
You know.
absolutely correct.
But somehow
And then,
the next
and then
day,
he went, and
I-
then when he came back, it
People
was like,
booed.
oh no.
yeah,
that's
that
right.
was
Yeah.
that was the horrible
yes,
night.
that was a horrible night.
That was it.
But you just, I don't know, you take a deep breath
Yeah.
and come back.
Well,
I never.
I remember because Steve would only come once or twice a week during previews, and of course I'd be there every night.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, every time he came, he'd go, "I don't know what you're talking about. I seem to love it." He missed a few of the booing nights.
No, I
Did you witness a couple?
I'm trying. No, oh sure I did. Oh sure. Otherwise, how would I have red flagged all those things? But I don't think I was there the night
Can't
they
red
applauded. I
flag
think
the show.
Oh come on.
No, it's tricky. I think I always have believed the show would have succeeded more, or at least initially had it been in a small space, because it's such an intense show. The thing about being in a 1,000-seat theater, it let people off the hook a little bit. Whereas when you're in a small environment, you can't escape it.
The trouble is, there's no such thing as a small environment with a full orchestra. Oops. A little dissolved there.
A little arty-farty.
This was quite stylized for television, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Probably we didn't have enough pieces to put together. So.
No, I don't know how you came up with this, John. I mean, this is such a hard moment to do. How do you do something
Didn't
like
I
this?
have a mask
It's such a
at some point?
cinematic.
Oh, yeah, you
did,
had a
that's
mask.
Right.
What was the mask? Tragedy
I
and
can't-
comedy?
Some like white.
And we had a double too. At some point there was, maybe that's why there was a mask. It was a mask of me.
Oh, that's
There was
right.
a mold
yes,
of my
right,
face
right,
on
right.
another actor.
On Juliet.
Absolutely
That's
right.
On Juliet.
Juliet.
Right.
That's right.
Nightmares are hard to do on the stage, man. So easy in movies.
I feel so warm.
You became ill after carrying Senora Fosca back in the rain.
When was that?
2 days ago. You still have some fever, but it's lower now.
Did you see that Dr. James as a manipulator or as an unwitting
Oh no, he was
participant in
always
this?
the kind of puppeteer here.
I think he's bored of being out there. And
Yeah.
I think this is what I think that's why he does it, out of boredom. That was certainly, I think, what I got in the movie too.
I mean, you sometimes know when you're not quite clear. Because I remember we had a hard time casting this role, and we cast Bill Duff Griffin because he had such a
Sinister.
specific quality, and in fact, in the end, it was a mistake because it worked against him or worked against us, I should say. He's a good actor; it didn't have anything to do with him. But his quality was so specific, there was no playing around with it.
To touch a woman's hand.
It's a beautiful reprise of that
Gorgeous.
section.
Reminded me how much I long to be with you. How long I've
Oh, this
Yes, this is in
Transition
the train.
was-
Transition to the train is wonderful. All of James's transitions were great because
The
they
supporting
were
cast.
stately without being languid.
That was something also I remember during the workshop, that watching James and Paul Gemignani work together to create these transitions out of some
Out
of
of
these
the material
themes
that
that
existed,
Stephen
yeah.
had given us. And that was really beautiful to watch, and the collaboration of that.
No, Paul is wonderful.
Oh, Marin, you just
Another
look
dress.
amazing.
Another dress.
So
I love
stunning.
this too. Love that little top.
Another blanket.
She'll be there for you.
Now, this was the scene where when we first began on Broadway, we really had a hard time keeping the audience.
No, well, it really has to do with her entrance.
Yeah.
It really had to do with the entrance.
Well, also just at this point, this was when the relentlessness became
Yeah.
just unbearable.
Well, yes, exactly. It
came in,
might
how
sort
it
of
just-
become claustrophobic
Love that.
almost.
So
You're
great.
really in there with Fosca and
Yeah.
Giorgio here.
Yeah.
I love the way Jere plays the scene. I really believed he'd been broken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jess, nothing could be further from what I wished for you.
Yeah, the whole momentum of the piece for me, if we had a break in there somewhere, it just wouldn't
Right.
Mm-hmm.
have felt the same way.
I've heard what you said, Giorgio. I've come to tell you I'll keep my distance. Stay out of your path. But I can be nearby. I can be there quietly waiting.
Do you like my new dress?
It's so pretty.
Oh, look, yes, it is a new dress.
The color really does a lot for your complexion.
Why did you have different dresses?
Actually, it's not like I had a different one for. I think
Right.
we thought
No.
she had maybe two dresses or three dresses. That was.
Oh, even the detail of the material on
Oh,
Everything.
absolutely.
Jared's a gorgeous show.
I mean, your clothes were beautiful.
If you looked at, they were
If
beautiful.
you looked at them, the detail on them, the fabrics, they were just gorgeous.
And the time that Jane would take, we would talk about, where something would hit me on the arm, so you'd see what was
Huh.
sort of fragile about the bones in my wrist,
My God, really?
and
Everything.
Oh my God.
little tiny. It's just.
All the little
And those
details.
things you carry with you on stage, and
God is in the details.
Yeah,
absolutely.
sure is.
Sorry. No one has ever taught me how.
Really touching her realization.
I would love to go back and look at this
the
scene.
line about being taught to love, not being taught to love. It's
You
heartbreaking.
learn.
Heartbreaking.
To do with my feelings. You understand that, Giorgio? Don't you?
It's interesting, I must be, at least for the three of you, to have a camera close up on what is essentially stage acting. You know, because you are
Well, we
acting
did scale it down,
larger.
didn't we?
Yeah.
we
Are
scaled
Are you
down
giving
the
smaller
perform-
performances?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were.
definitely.
Because it's so convincing camera-wise.
I guess we must have been on the stage right there with the camera on this scene. We couldn't have
Yeah, you
gotten
were
that from
over.
out
They
in
were
the audience.
overs. Yeah.
Such a beautiful song.
Oh my God.
Yeah, well, this is
I-
where the show turned, I think, when this song came in.
I never understood why. I mean, I just...
Well, because you understand, you
I
suddenly...
mean, I understand intellectually. It's just, you know, since I bought everything emotionally, I couldn't understand.
Well, because you
it.
understand her. You know, she goes from being a laughable kind of relentless figure to somebody who's vulnerable, and she turns. The character is more likable all of a sudden. Which allows him to like
To me,
her.
it was like revealing what was always inside of her, though. It's not.
But I see, and I fought it because I thought, oh, God, you're going to spell it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Guess what?
And I needed spelling out.
But Jerry, this was a pivotal scene for Giorgio too.
Sure,
He
put it
changes
mildly.
his.
Well, I always felt
view
it
of her.
was, and also the dialogue that follows this lands well now, you know, about would Clara give up her life for you?
Yeah.
Remember, there was when you first wrote this, there was a front piece to it that we just did one performance.
Really? I don't
Yeah,
remember
that had a kind of rolling da-da.
Yeah, it rings a bell.
Why did we get rid of it?
Well,
You
because
you-
it said even more, and
Yeah.
this was we just did it
Yeah.
once.
I always wanted us to have more.
I remember coming home on I can't remember if Monday was our day off or Sunday was our day off.
Sundays were, yeah.
Then I came home on a Sunday night and I'd gotten a call from you that you were faxing over
Oh, yeah, I
this
remember
piece
that.
of music.
Yeah.
And I remember I checked and got my messages and I said, we have to get home now. And I just remember it being there like gold.
One of the reasons this song, this will sound very cynical, but it's true. One of the reasons this song is as short as it is I deliberately wrote it so there would be no chance for a second chorus, because I thought I am not going to spell it out any more than this. Nobody can then say to me, Steve, if only we could have like half a chorus more, I could say, but there's nothing more to say. Sorry, what, Ira?
I'm just remembering this was the last thing I think that was written. Or
Yeah.
among the last things that were written.
Well, it certainly was the last major piece.
What about the finale or the sort of
That-
we
we
played
put
An
with that, right?
interweaving of
Yeah, of
themes in the
themes.
finale, yeah.
Because originally, as I say, it was based on one of the other songs, and I cannot remember which one it is.
I always liked this moment.
Mm-hmm,
Yes.
And this is so different than the movie.
This was the point where you knew they were either with us or they weren't for me.
Yeah.
So you could just feel it land.
Mm-hmm.
This was, I don't remember whether this was me or the book, actually, at that moment.
My guess is it's you. And there's that weird little line about faces in the rocks. Completely surreal, opaque line. I know.
So beautiful.
I just love the fact it could mean so many things.
Touch again. You've never been away.
And now for something completely different.
Amused, Captain, but it is all quite bizarre, really. She led you back like a lamb.
You know her, and you know there is no way I could have acted differently.
Well, you needn't worry. No one knows of her exploits.
Well, I suppose I should be relieved.
Your whole demeanor
Is
and presence has
completely
completely
different.
shifted.
I hardly thought it a secret.
What is it that you want, Doctor?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, you know what I mean.
It's fun to see this again.
They're meaty roles.
It spoiled me. The bar was so high after this.
My brush with greatness. Glad I have it.
She tells me that you're going to Milan tomorrow, but only for
It's
4
funny,
days.
when I saw it down in D.C., it was like I'd never
Forgotten.
seen it, let alone written
Wow.
it.
Yeah.
I wasn't really quite sure what was going to happen next. I got caught
That's
up in
good.
it. Yeah.
That's good.
Forget that I'm your superior. You can't forego a sick leave just like that. Has Senora Fosca brought you to this?
Absolutely not. This is my decision.
Can't you see what she's doing, do you? To your mental state? Well, I may have helped bring this woman into your life, but I can also get you away from her for your own good. I can see to it that you're transferred permanently. If I send a dispatch to headquarters, you'll be ordered to
I
leave.
don't wish to be
The
transferred.
scene coming up is, I thought, as subtle and difficult a scene to play as
Which
the one
is that?
between Clara and Giorgio on the
Yeah.
bench. That's a
We
real
rehearsed that a
acting
lot.
scene.
I
That's a
remember.
real acting scene.
Just getting
Boy,
it.
that's a hard one. I think
Right.
she did it great, but I mean, it's really that's a
There's a lot of
real
book
scene.
in this show, isn't there?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Thank God. No, I know that sounds
Well, it's funny
what
you
I mean
say-
is, one of the reasons I don't like opera is I love the contrast between speech and song. I think it's so theatrical when people speak and then sing and then speak and then sing.
But it's funny you say about losing it and stating the point. But you always used to say to me that, that was one of the great things that you could do musically, that you could make the points without me having to do it in the book.
Yes, fair enough. But see, I thought the point had already been
Oh,
made. That's
okay.
as I say. So everybody disagreed with me, so I said, okay, I'll write a song.
Well, it's just music does it in such a
Yeah,
different way.
it does. It does.
Sunrise, wouldn't that be beautiful?
That's the coat you wanted, Marin?
That's the coat I wanted.
Sure
I
is
still
terrific.
want it. I'm looking at it going.
Well, how would you wear that? I mean, you would
Well, you
just
could
throw
wear
over
that.
a
You
pair
could
of
wear it with like
jeans?
black. You could wear it with like black leggings, like velvet.
Uh-huh.
No, I think about that coat.
We ought to
Because
track
it
it
has the
down.
black beads hanging. We can't
Did it
really
go
see
to
it. The
Jet
black
beads.
beads, the jet beads on it that are just stunning.
We ought to track it
Probably
down.
It's
living
in
at
a
the
box.
doily cart
It's in a
somewhere.
box
It's
somewhere.
Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah, I wonder if
in London.
everything is still over in
I
London.
wonder.
When did this open on Broadway? What year was that?
94.
Well, we're gonna have to have our little 10-year
I know.
anniversary then.
Okay. Right, that's true. That's true.
March 24th, 1994. No,
That was
that's
the
when
first
previews.
preview,
First
yeah.
Opened May
May
9th,
9th, yeah.
1994.
Oh, yes, yet another show we postponed the opening for. Every single one of my shows seem to postpone.
Forgotten, really.
Seem to shed.
She needs you.
God, did we do that much work? We had that many wow. Boy, my memory's terrible. I would have thought we had like 3 weeks previews.
50-something performances of previews.
Wow.
Wow, that is some dress.
Sitting in that.
Yeah, I was going to say, how does
maneuvering
one
that-
always have to sit side saddle, huh?
Yeah.
I wonder what was behind that fashion of that day, for that. Well, I guess it showed wealth that you had could
Keeping
afford a
distance,
Keeping the
dress.
too.
distance, yeah.
To lose me.
I don't want to lose you, Giorgio. You
Well,
knew
but there
me.
was also a reason for bustles. What was that we read about when we
Well,
were doing
bustles
Sunday?
in France, there's a theory that it was because birth control, anal sex was very in,
That's it.
so that they
That's it.
accentuate the rear end.
That's right.
It's an
That's
attractive part of the anatomy.
Right, that's what it was. Because I remember that coming up during Sunday.
Yes, I suppose that's true, Giorgio. Just as you have chosen to forego your sick leave.
No memorable gaffes and performances. Nothing you remember
No, just
anywhere.
well,
in
you
the
know,
show in
those-
general?
Dropping a scene or a line or forgetting an
We're doing-
entrance or...
I don't remember you guys being out much either. There weren't very few
No,
understudies.
I was never out. Jerry was out.
I
a
missed
couple.
8.
Yeah.
Were you out, Donna? I don't think
I
I
have
saw-
understudy stories, but
I
they're not to be told. the doing the bed scene, doing the nude scene with two. I did them with two different guys, and
Oh,
I have some funny stories about them.
Come on, cut them
Just
some
the
slack,
just
Marin.
the, I
Cut
mean,
them
it's the
slack.
nervousness of
Right.
Sure.
of people.
Sure, sure.
Completely understandable.
You're a frightening woman.
Were you out, Donna, ever?
I had a family obligation that I took like 3 days.
July.
I had
Around
to,
July,
I had to
yeah,
go.
I remember
yeah.
that
July, I
too.
remember.
A long-standing commitment I had to.
Oh.
That's long.
Christening.
Yes.
And
He
I
was
got
a
sick at the
joyful.
end.
That's
Yes,
such a
you
great...
got sick. That's right. You had the flu.
My kids were christened down there.
Sua potestà, o novella di gran.
You were out once in previews. Because Matt
Was it?
Coretta went
Matt
out.
Coretta, Maddie.
Did you show your kids the show yet, Jerry?
No way.
Why?
I'll wait till they're 18.
Oh, Jere,
Too much
it's not that.
confusion. Too much confusion.
Oh, not.
The man on the bed.
They're hipper by the time they're 15, 14.
Here's Donna.
Donna's
There's
just
the
wearing
red
red
dress.
dress.
Yes, the red
At last.
dress.
Sure, Olivia de Havilland. She's beautiful.
Yes. Oh, we see it is Olivia. It is the heiress.
It is. It's the same
It's the hair.
period too.
It's
and
also
hair.
it's the hair. It's the
Yes.
hairstyle.
Cherry Jones and I used to joke about going out as a sister act.
And I appreciate that.
Colonel? Excuse me.
A hard show to stage.
Oh,
There's
I'll
just
say.
nothing on
No,
stage.
exactly, and not an awful lot going on in terms of outside of singing.
Yes. Thank you.
It's kind of you to
Ooh,
do.
your eyes are, Jerry. How beautiful.
Why, thank you.
You look very charming.
Yeah, we took some of that white thing around your neck is gone. It makes such a difference. It's like you're slightly undressed or something.
Right, he's not buttoned.
Yeah.
Is that because? Oh, well, that's not because you didn't have time to change, obviously. Because
There was
it's
time,
on
but
camera.
it was
On the
just-
camera,
Just
it's
made,
no
but
problem.
we made a choice, I think,
Yeah.
to kind of make him a little undressed compared to everyone else.
Right.
They all got their
A little inappropriate.
their
I think.
medals
Right.
on. Yeah.
Male braid.
Oh, this dialogue.
Truffle-
Oh, this
truffle
so
dialogue. Truffle dialogue. The truffle dialogue.
I thought we needed more.
Filler. Try writing that stuff. Try filling out that. Ay, ay, ay. All that dining table blather. That was hard.
Report immediately.
Immediately?
This is most unusual, Captain.
Oh, really?
Oh, shit.
That's a funny close-up. Oh dear.
Fosca.
This moment in the writing, we talked a lot about
this
whether
is
she
tough.
should, as in the movie, whether she should scream and run across the stage,
Right.
or whether she
Yeah,
should, you know,
I remember
because the whole thing that she's got to revert to her hysteria, but should she do it before?
Right.
She said because in the movie she does it before she runs across the room.
Do you hold your breath? Is that how you like turn purple? What did you do to do that?
Talking about me?
Yeah.
There was just a containment
Just a
thing.
flush, huh? That was amazing. It read from the stage too.
Mm-hmm.
It really reads here, obviously. This was always a hard point for people
Well,
to grasp the idea of let's have a duel.
Right.
Was this your concoction? Was this the reason for the duel? Was the discovery of the letter?
Yeah, it was the
The
book.
discovery
I
of-
believe the duel came. This whole plot thing came out of the book. This thing coming up, I remember. I
This-
invented though the
Yeah.
leave your.
This,
Well-
how are we going to leave him tonight?
Right.
It
Oh,
was
that
like
kept changing.
It kept
That
changing.
kept-
Like every night came different ways to.
Yeah, and,
Did this-
and you and I, this was the thing we talked most about in the writing. You had so many ways of approaching this.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a piece that took a long time to write, not
Right.
per se in the writing, but in deciding what it
The
should be.
plot point.
Right.
Yeah.
I think originally she said her husband discovered the letters,
Yes,
and
exactly.
yeah?
There was that, and then there was a point too where she had decided, you know,
Yes.
that she was going to say it's over, it's off.
That's right.
And
No,
and then
this was
finally,
better.
and this was the right.
Well, this is
it
dramatic.
clearly,
was,
and it
clearly
puts the onus on him
Mhm,
to decide,
to decide,
which he
right.
needs
No,
to
I think
do.
a lot of our writing had to do on behalf of Giorgio
Yes.
because he
Mhm.
seemed so undramatic as a character, and you never quite understood
Mhm.
why he made his choices. That's a great
that
choice.
dress, the bow on the look at the
Just
back of the bow
stunning.
on the back of that dress, and the beading again.
Every
It's
element.
also interesting that when they're towards the as they get to the end of the show, she becomes the darker one, and
Yeah.
Fosca
Fosca
becomes the
becomes-
lighter
Lighter
one.
That's
Yeah.
and that's that when I talked about wanting to begin and end with orgasms, that's part of what I had in mind was that Fosca becomes Clara and Clara becomes Fosca, because I think that's part of what Tarquetti meant. That we're all Clara, we're all Fosca, and we're all Giorgio.
You did such great work on your voice.
Mm-hmm. Deborah, I worked with
Remember
Deborah. Yes. Yes.
I gave you the part. I said, I can't know that you're from Illinois.
From
Well, you mean diction? You don't mean
Yes,
voice.
we worked.
Diction.
We worked on.
Oh, yeah.
She was
Gosh.
great.
It was
I
fun.
don't remember
Yes. Mm-hmm. It was fun.
We could have just had him say, I fell in love with this American girl. Save Marin a lot of trouble.
And me.
Yeah, that's true. You too from America.
Well, the whole thing is to see Fosca for what Clara is really, in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
When the changes would happen, it was jarring. You know?
So convenient. Love isn't something scheduled.
Oh, you use the, is this what you call love theme again here?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To Clara as opposed to Fosca.
That's the idea.
It's love unless it's unconditional. Love doesn't give a
Did we
damn.
throw things on pretty fast in previews?
Mm-hmm.
We
Yes,
did?
a lot.
Yeah.
I remember
Like
day
that
of a
came
few
and
times,
went.
yeah.
Day of, yeah, came and went. One night.
When Loving You came in, I remember we sort of got to the end of day of rehearsing, and I said, so this isn't going in tonight, we're going to wait till tomorrow. You said, no, it's going in tonight.
Did it go in orchestrated or did it go in with piano?
Just piano.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember being taught by you, Steve, down in the little hall.
basement?
In the basement
Little
there.
lounge, yeah.
Okay, see you in 3 hours.
Yeah.
But that's I'm in awe of musical performers because that all inevitably happens. That you rehearse something in the day, put it in at night.
Well, we were a little up against the ropes, too. I mean, we
Yeah.
were...
I think
really
performers
working
rather
with
like
the-
that, and
It was
these three can
exciting.
argue. But because I remember finishing the hat and signing the part with George, and I said to Manny, "No, give it a day or so." He said, "Well, put it in tonight." I played it for him at 4:00 in the afternoon.
I remember that.
We've been lucky that way in
Yeah,
the performance
but
we've had.
it was
in
his
shows.
eagerness. That's what I'm talking about.
Right.
It's that thing of I got a new piece of material. Okay, so it'll go in the piano. So I'll do it with the piano.
It's also hard once you know that
Oh, yeah, you can't.
that
yeah.
Right,
to
then you
want-
cannot
to
do
take
it.
a step, what feels like a step backwards, to play something that you know you're moving on from.
Right.
That night, if I hadn't put in Loving You, but I knew that moment.
Well,
we were moving
I see.
towards it,
Oh,
you
never
know.
occurred to me.
It's
Yeah.
Of course.
you want to feel like you keep
Right,
moving
of
forward.
Of course. Once you've been married, you
Those
can
are the
never
only
not
times
have been
you feel
married
like
again.
anything,
Yeah.
As George Firth would say.
Huh. Greg had a hard part. This
Yeah.
is a difficult role.
Yeah. It doesn't have a lot of color to it, and he's a little young for it.
Would write her a letter like this.
He's the conveyor of the plot.
Yeah,
He's
that's
the catalyst for the plot.
I love the way he sings.
Forgive me for saying this, but you had no right to read that letter. No right to take it from her.
You guys duke it out right there.
He led on in such a manner.
You don't know your cousin. She is not a child, and she's not just a sick person. Senora Fosca is as responsible for her actions as I am for mine.
You have abused my good faith. You have come into my house to dishonor it. Your attitude towards me is nothing short of contemptuous. I must demand a reparation from you, and mere words will not suffice.
What?
So purple.
Well, that's 19th century.
Yeah. Well, particularly if you're writing a scene that leads up to a duel. You're too relaxed in your conversation.
Say, has she forced
No,
you?
not at all. Nothing was forced on me.
Gentlemen, let's come to our senses
One
here.
more thing.
Yes.
My cousin knows nothing of this discovery.
Such a heroic role, Giorgio.
What's hard also in the writing of this scene is getting the doctor in and out of the conversation. He has to be there for just enough of it so he can't stop it entirely. I didn't hear that. It's really hard. Very hard.
Colonel, we'll calm down. There's still time to explain.
I wish to see.
Steve, is this where you put the song?
Yeah,
in
this is
London?
what. Yeah, it's not really a new song. It's the song that he sings in the bedroom. I wanted a big statement of it. I wanted a great, big, romantic, some enchanted evening statement of his feelings for Fosca, and James didn't, and so
So we did actually do it, huh, Jerry?
we
did.
tried
Yeah,
it,
we did.
and then you said, "Steve, I really think."
Did we
you
do
might
it in front of an audience?
We did.
And how often?
I'd say a week anyway.
Oh, that long, huh?
It seemed like it was there a few days anyway. I believe so.
I know because it was
At
orchestrated.
least I worked on it for a
It
week.
was orchestrated, but when we did in
Yeah.
London, and so we did it in London every night, and actually worked quite well. But then, at least I thought it did. But then seeing it in Washington this summer, I'm afraid James is right that it was just too big a statement. It happened all before this given moment now. And he sang it, and then he went and sang a little reprise of it to Fosca in the
Well, I always
bedroom.
felt it robbed this scene.
Yep,
Right.
and you're right.
Steve, am I just hearing things, or when I watched this the other day in preparation for this, I thought I heard the piano, the Fosca's piano music theme as the melody for this song.
Oh, sure.
Is that what it was based on?
And there's a lot of that throughout the show. That theme occurs in a lot of kind of disguised ways. Da da ya da ba ba ya.
I'm sorry to surprise you like this.
Thank you for coming.
I wanted you to know that I had nothing to do with the transfer.
I know that now.
This was also beautifully played.
Oh, this always broke me up when Jere declares himself.
A letter from Clara.
Yes.
It's over. Finished.
I'm sorry.
Sorry? I would have thought that you would be pleased.
There was a time
I
when
wonder what happened to Clara.
Who was it? Wasn't a spoof, but somebody wanted to write about what happened to Clara.
A sequel.
I was in a letter. Somebody sent me a letter.
Passion Less.
This
Never
is the
loved
one
the title
scene, though. I
Passion.
think there was one time I did go up.
Oh, really?
In this scene?
I had to finish a couple of yours, and I think you kind of chuckled at me afterward for trying to write a Sondheim musical.
No, we had trouble with the title. What we wanted to do was we wanted to call it Passione, but
Passione d'amore.
I would have Passion, but Inarado had already taken it. That's Albert Inarado, the playwright, for those who.
Love without pride or shame.
This was the song that he sang big for those who care.
No wisdom, no judgment, no caution, no blame. No one has ever known.
Beautiful tune.
And Steve, it became so much more romantic. It was originally more
bombastic.
Bombastic, yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. No,
Made it
this
more intimate.
this
Yeah,
is
I
a
remember
place
that.
where restraint is so much more moving.
Oh, that look on your face, Donna, says so much.
Listen to the sound in his voice at this point too. To kill it.
It's so warm and full.
Just exactly. It's just heartbroken.
Are you cold?
I'm afraid.
It's just that 104 temperature.
It's down to
We
102.
did have a lot of laughter in
Relatively.
this show, didn't we? As I recall, you guys never lost your sense of humor. We had some good yucks about old
It was
Fosca.
mandatory.
Yes, it was.
Do you remember at the beginning, Captain?
Captain.
Oh, Captain.
Captain.
Did you actually say that?
We were goofing around. I think you got it stuck in your head. You never let on that it flashed in your mind. I very much doubt it did during performance.
Well, I am one of the worst crack-ups, and so that's why.
Do you crack people up too? You like to do
No,
that?
no.
You don't?
No, I can't. No, I
would
can't.
have expected you would be
I
the
can't
mistress of it.
Because Steve, once I go, I'm gone for a long, long time.
I know, but I mean, what about when you do comic roles? Like when you do.
Well, I don't think I've ever. I'm trying to think if I've done one in a long enough run, because I'm just afraid that I will go, and we won't be able to come back.
Yeah. What about you,
Some
Marin?
people are great at that.
Are you mischievous?
No, I'm very much. I don't, especially in comedy, because you end up just standing on stage laughing.
Yeah.
And the audience is just sitting there, and I feel very
audiences
strong about that.
sometimes love
If
watching.
it happens,
if
if
it's
it happens
spontaneously.
spontaneously,
Yeah, right.
But I'm not one to to instigate.
I gotcha.
Like I'm gonna screw up tonight. I'm gonna get you. Let's have a
I'll pull
twinkle
a
in our
prank,
eye and that sort of thing. Yeah, I don't like that.
If it's not inside if the audience is brought into it, it's
When things just
Yeah.
happen naturally, that's the best.
Here they go.
Yeah. I don't remember this being lit this dark. I'm serious. It's dawn. Isn't it supposed to be dawn?
What?
Jere. Just another thing you
just
try to crack me up with.
Oh, remember those hats with the hair thing on them?
Mm-hmm.
The
Was it
hair
horse
thing.
hair?
Horsehair.
That horsehair on the hats. That is, yeah, you'll see it
Like a
on
Linda Lowe
soldiers.
ponytail.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I enjoy being a soldier.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Hello. They are great costumes.
Were there nights the guns didn't go off?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There were nights when it flew stuff across.
All right,
stage,
I
too.
remember that.
There was a key change in staging here, where
Right.
one of them was upstage, one of them was downstage, and then by reversing them, it made it. Because wasn't there a laugh or something?
Or you
There
couldn't
was
quite
something
figure out
wrong.
what happened.
There was
yeah.
something wrong when Jere was downstage and Gregg was upstage, and you reversed it, I think. Something was changed in the staging here.
Oh, here comes the scream.
Yeah.
Which I never got.
Did you do this live, Jere, that scream?
Yeah, it may have been
No, I think we put
augmented
it
in a
on
way, but
tape.
I did. It wasn't entirely, but
It's the Fosca scream.
Yeah,
was it?
we-
Was it you just
That's the
continued
idea.
it with echo?
I don't
I
think,
think
we
you
ever.
reverbed it.
I don't think we ever made that connection, unfortunately.
We never made it work, but I know it was done live, at least to a large degree. Because I remember that's what my big fear was, blowing it,
Right.
Mhm.
blowing my voice.
I guess you're right. I guess the connection never did quite work.
No.
I wonder why. Maybe we should have had maybe we should have had the same voice do it. I don't
No, I
mean
know
that
what you
literally.
mean,
but
yeah.
I think a lot of Fosca's screams were off stage.
Well, no, I don't think the point that somehow he gets her illness was ever really quite made
Yeah.
clear. I don't know how you do it. I mean, it was so interesting.
3 days after the night that you last saw each other. She died unaware of what occurred between you and her cousin.
The sense of her contagion, I'm not
Yeah.
sure it was ever clear to an audience.
Yeah.
I wanted to speak to the colonel about you to try to convince him of your innocence. But in the end, I worried that I would hurt your cause more than help
Great
it.
colors. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
I have said and done enough. In a box I'm mailing, you will find papers left behind in your desk. Also enclosed, you will find some personal belongings of Senora Fosca's and a letter that she wrote to you just prior to her death.
That's the hair.
That's the hair.
Yeah.
Just sort of
Just
didn't make a meal of it, did you?
Oh, she left that. Oh, nice.
It's military matter.
James, do you remember, was this always a recapitulation this way, or was it...
I sort of recall
Yeah.
just kind of, for the workshop, we kind of quickly put something together and then we
Right.
we sort of kept
Yeah.
it.
I did a lot of this by phone with Paul. I wrote a sort of general sketch.
The end is near. The time has come for me to.
I forgot about that curtain behind me.
These past 2 days since you have left, since we were together, have been a revelation.
This is where one of the magazines of film went. I remember this is a sloppy, funky cutting in here.
Now at last, this, ba-da, 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 this is what the original ending was all this tune. Ya-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ya-da-da, loving you, loving you, loving you. And then, and it wasn't going to be, I wish I could forget you. And then, well, maybe it was the reverse, but the point was, it was only going to be one of them. No?
Yeah, this is the strange shot I had to use. It was the only one I had of you
Oh, yeah.
coming in.
I nursed inside for all those years.
Really, it's kind of miraculous we got as good a record of this as we did in such
Such a short
short,
schedule.
really short.
The 3
time.
days, James?
Two, I think it was just two, not even
And it wasn't
two.
just losing them. Wasn't there one camera that turned out to be shaky all the time?
Yeah, there was one that shook and one that we lost the film because the person opened up the magazine. But we didn't do very many pickups at all, as I recall. It was pretty much just run the show and shoot it, run the show and shoot it. I don't think we really stopped very often.
Should be said, I think this is one of the most successful translations onto
Oh, I think
stage,
I think it's
onto,
the most.
video.
I think it's the most that I've seen anyway, and I think it's because of the use of film.
Well, no, you know why? Because there's no audience, and
Yeah, that's also true.
you don't have buttons of songs, so it doesn't really matter that there's no audience. Most shows, you know, you're so
Yeah,
used to an
that's also
audience
true.
response.
That's
Well,
true,
and the
too.
There's so
intimacy
many more
of the
dimensions
close-up.
to it, yeah.
Yeah. I think it allowed people to see sort of subtleties in the palette, in the performing palette, that were lost on some people in the theater.
Big level.
Right.
And that I learned from you.
Well, Jonathan's orchestration of the
Oh,
show.
boy. Oh, my God.
Oh,
Or through, one must really acknowledge him throughout.
throughout.
Truly.
It's
Stunning.
dazzling as all his work always is. It's just so astonishing. But, boy, it was the climax of I Wish I Could Forget You. It's just thrilling.
Oh, I've
It's
got
like something
chills
else.
Yeah.
I did
watching
too.
this.
And should you die tomorrow, another thing I see.
Your love will live in me.
It's the I See Now I Was Blind. That's the moment.
Love will live in me.
Your 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 love will live in me.
That's what it was. This was all the ending. And then after I wrote Loving You, then I used it for the first half. Because, of course, in the workshop, this is the way it ended.
Right.
Will live in me.
I remember going upstage. If there goes my memory.
Fosca going upstage?
That's what I remember. But I realize now is
I
that's
went
the
off
London
left,
London
yeah.
production.
And in D.C., I think she
Yep,
went
yep,
upstage because
yep,
she's...
right. Yep. Yep.
Well, what an exquisite adaptation.
Oh, it's fun to see again.
Yes, it
It
was
was.
nice.
That was quite amazing to see again. And scary.
Let's watch it again. It's over now. Yeah, it's nice to have a record of this. It's just good.
Yes, it
Yes,
is.
it is.
Oh, Marcus Olson, I've forgotten. That's right. Of course.
Yeah, I don't know. I know he went
He's-
back to school.
He's a
right?
teacher.
Yes,
He's in
Is he?
yes, in Michigan,
Yes,
I believe.
Yes.
Where in Michigan do you
I don't know.
Univers-
Is it-
the
Oh, it
theater
is at
program at
University of
University of
Oh,
Michigan.
that's
Michigan.
right.
Yeah,
He moved,
in
he
Ann
moved up
Arbor.
there. He had gone
In
down
Ann
to
Arbor.
mid-south, and then he went to mid-north.
Did the
Midwest.
best Marlon Brando impersonation I've ever heard.
Really?
Did.
Oh,
Mel Gibson.
Got-
What happened to Beverly Randolph? Why is
But
it-
she knows she
Mel
was
Gibson
there.
stage managed the taping.
to
But
taping.
Beverly's
No,
name,
Beverly
Beverly's
was
Yeah,
earlier.
name was there.
Yeah.
This is-
With the
this is all
theatrical
the,
credits and then the
Right.
video credits.
Well,
Paul Sir, SRP. That's my goodness. That's an actual name.
well, we'll see you at the 10-year anniversary.
We should do
Craft
something like
services.
that.
Yeah.
Post Perfect. That's a nice name for post-production company.
Thanks for doing this, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Ira.
You're welcome. It was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
Louis Perez is the one who filled me full of that Gatorade.
Louis Perez.
He just did the choreography for
La
La
Mancha.
Mancha.
Yeah, he stepped
Louis
up.
Perez?
Yeah.
Kelly Gleason.
Kelly
Do you remember the
Gleason,
dolls?
right?
That
Do
was
you remember the dolls?
the dolls?
Yes.
I
Did
think
she
about
make
80
little-
years from now,
Donna.
those
Yes,
dolls will
honey.
be on like
Oh,
Antique Roadshow or something.
she had a
That's
whole
right.
gift line.
Oh.
She had a whole bunch. She made boxes.
That's right.
Of
Who
with
did?
them. This Kelly Gleason. And there's the mold.
That's wonderful.
They're
You have to look at the instructions inside.
Oh.
It's the best. How to apply them.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That is brilliant.
Oh,
Funny.
my God. Oh, that's
and
great.
deciding on the placement
Oh, that's really funny.
and their meanings.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Sexy,
Love
dashing,
that.
philosophical, inquisitive, bold.
Who did this up
Who did makeup?
One of the
Kelly
wardrobe
Gleason.
ladies.
What's
Gal-
Kelly Gleason?
Kelly
Where is
Gleason.
Kelly Gleason
I haven't.
these days?
I don't know.
I don't-
I lost touch with her after like 2 or 3 years,
Yeah,
but she
I don't know.
had a wicked sense of humor.
She was
Was
funny.
very.
You could tell.
Yeah.
Oh, she.
She did so much of those things. Different
And everybody
little
thought my mic was another mole.
A few times.
No, there are 3. No, there are 2.